Welcome to Sports Wagering U. We're here to talk with Ben from Capwise about the Big Sky Conference. Ben, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to dive into some Big Sky basketball. It's probably my favorite conference to handicap, and as well the tournament I look forward to every year. So I'm excited for you to bring me on to discuss it.
Yeah, and I probably should have said I'm Kyle Hunter at Kyle Hunter Picks. This is Ben Carey from Capwise. Ben does great work. I know he knows the Big Sky really well. The Big Sky, I think it might be my favorite conference to bet, Ben, which is crazy because I'm not even close to the Big Sky. I'm in
Hmm.
Ohio, but I just think that there are some pretty good betting angles here. As you know, overs have done really well in the Big Sky in the long term because there is very little defense played here, and just some kind of fun under the radar teams. Teams that really can't make any noise in the big dance because they're too weak, but overall they're pretty fun and there can be some value on these, and these stay under the radar for a long time. So I like this conference quite a bit. Let's bring up a look at the bracket here for the Big Sky.
Hmm.
This will
And
just give us.
one quick thing I wanted to say
Mhm.
about the Big Sky too, and I know Kyle, you've seen this firsthand this year. These teams have like a higher ceiling than a lot of this other smaller mid-major conferences, but the inconsistency is what kills them. Like you'll have Northern Colorado drop 100 one game, and then the next they can go cold, and you'll see glimpses and flashes from these teams. But I think the problem as a whole with the Big Sky, other than Montana State, is just the inconsistency that you'll see day in and day out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Ben, I'm going to pose a question to you. You know what interests me a lot about the Big Sky is there's a lot of teams that rank really high in away from home rating. I would have thought that the Big Sky has such good home court advantages. It surprises me to see so many teams ranking up really high in the away from home ratings. We see Weber State really high there, Northern Colorado very high there. What are your thoughts on why some of these teams have actually played so well on the road?
I think it's the three ball. I think with the three ball and a lot of these teams relying on the three, teams can get hot on the road, and they can come back home and not have that same level of efficiency when in reality you think it should be the other way around. But we've seen that with Northern Colorado a few times. I think we've seen that with Montana State, Montana maybe a few times. So I would have to point at that. That's my best guess. There could be something else that's underlying, but that would be my best guess as to why.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There's a lot of teams that can hit the three ball here. Some teams that take pretty good care of the basketball. It's not like some of the other leagues where it's just constant turnover after turnover. So you can get some pretty interesting games. So as we look at this bracket, Ben, these games start up on Wednesday. We're recording this here on Tuesday evening, Eastern time. These games start Wednesday, and I have to say, you know what I'm going to say first. This first game that starts at 9:30 local time. I still don't know why they do this game at this time, Ben. I haven't figured this one out.
They do it every year,
Uh,
and they never move away from it. It's
it's
tradition at this point.
it's like breakfast at the Big Sky. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting handicap, and we won't break down this game individually, but I will just say that this one always interests me. I think college players are not accustomed to this. In that game, we have Sacramento State and Idaho. I don't think either one of us think that either of those teams are going to make any kind of noise in this tournament, anyways. But let's look at the left side of this bracket here. Look at Wednesday's teams. If you had to point to one team that might be able to make a run that plays in that first day of games, who would you look at?
I have two, but the one in particular that I have to go with is Eastern Washington. They've had some big wins, and I think they're more in tune to go on a run. Last year they won it, but they lost a lot of the players on that team. The Groves brothers are now gone. Portland State's the other team that I just wanted to mention because they do shoot the three ball pretty well. They live and die by the three. I think in the Northern Colorado game they scored 100 points in that spot. Granted, Northern Colorado's defense was having a bad day, but I think those would be the two teams that I would. I guess I wouldn't be shocked if they somehow. Well, I guess if Portland State beat Southern Utah, I would be a little surprised, but they're capable of making a run.
Yeah, I was going to say the team I was going to mention would be Portland State. They play that really unique style. They press, force a lot of turnovers. I know they don't play quite as much of a full court press as they did last year with the coaching change, but Portland State's a unique team. They could beat anybody here, but I don't know if they're consistent enough to be able to win this whole tournament. I don't think they are good enough to win every single game here. Portland State's games also really tricky to handicap from a total standpoint because they play pretty quick. They're not always efficient. They do turn the ball over more than most teams in this league, and they force a lot of turnovers. So Portland State's a tricky matchup. I would think they should beat Idaho State in that first game. Uh, Southern Utah, I don't know what to make of Southern Utah, Ben. I think they're a pretty good team that's been a bit inconsistent this season. I think they were picked. If I remember right, Weber and Southern Utah were probably the two favorites in this league going
Mm-hmm.
into the season. And
Yeah.
Southern Utah, while they have the 2 seed, I feel like they've kind of disappointed at times throughout the course of the season. So I don't know what to think of them. I think Portland State would certainly have a chance to upset them in that second game. I don't think they'll make a run really deep here. And then, yeah, as far as the bottom game, Eastern Washington, certainly not the team they were last year, but a team that's been accustomed to winning a lot in this conference tournament. So I wouldn't want to discount their chances. So let's take a look at some of the odds here. I'll just
Yeah.
break down some of them here. FanDuel right now, Montana State plus 190, Southern Utah plus 350, Weber State plus 410, Northern Colorado plus 550, Montana plus 1,000, Eastern Washington plus 1,000. So I don't know. I've liked Montana State throughout the course of the season, and it's a team that I've bet on multiple times and had success betting with. I just don't think plus 190 is good enough. What is your thoughts there on Montana State's odds?
Yeah. Plus 190. It's definitely a conversation of is it value at that number, and I think it's probably right where it should be. Maybe plus 200. I mean, that's splitting hairs at that point. But I guess the idea is that you're going to get Sac State and Idaho in the first matchup, and they should be favored by maybe 9, 10 points there, if I'm just guessing. And Weber State, Montana, though, that's going to be a really good matchup, and the winner there has definitely a good opportunity to beat Montana State. I think the spread could be anywhere from like 4 to 5. Potentially a little lower. It depends because Montana did beat Montana State at home already this year. The interesting thing with Weber State is if we were talking about Weber State back on February 1st, right? Actually, we could even say February 3rd after they beat Montana. Like they were the clear cut favorite to win this conference.
Yeah.
And then they ended up losing, it looks like 6 out of their last 8. And they kind of hit a dry spell. I mean, they were really struggling. The 3 ball wasn't going down. The defense just started giving up a lot of open shots just pretty consistently. I think there's some good matchups with Weber State to Montana State, but I wanted to talk myself into betting Weber State, but the more I look at it, it's just kind of saying they're due to have a good game and to have a stretch of good games, but there's nothing that really tells me that that's going to happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think Weber State's kind of a good example too. Plus 410, I think is probably not good enough to take a futures price, but a money line rollover would be better than plus 410. I'm pretty sure in this case
Absolutely.
because they're playing. I guess the odds aren't out yet for Weber State and Montana, but I assume that line would be about 2. Weber is favored by a couple points in that one. Is that what you would think?
I could even see 3.5, but if it gets to 3.5, you would probably see some significant action on Weber.
Okay,
But
and then
that's the highest that we would see there, I think.
and you think a Weber State Montana State line would look about Montana State by 1?
Weber State,
1.5?
Montana State. Yeah, it's always interesting because if these two teams were to play right now, it would probably be Montana State -2 or -2.5. But considering Weber State would be coming off that win against Montana,
Right.
we have to factor that in. So I think -2 would probably be the number I think that you would see. So maybe like a plus 130, something like that, maybe.
Yeah. And then if they got in the final game against either Southern Utah or Northern Colorado, you're looking at it pretty close to a pick 'em, I would think, in some of those games. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, the tricky thing about Weber State is they could certainly lose the first game. Their upside is very high. I was kind of looking at the data while we were talking here, Ben. Their 3-point defense has been terrible in recent weeks. I mean, they've
Yeah.
given up a lot of threes. Um, it's kind of surprising. I didn't think they'd be that bad defensively. In fact, Weber was kind of thought to be one of the better defenses in this league before the season. And the 3-point defense has just been killing them. And their 3-point offense really hasn't been very good recently, like you said. So, having said that, if you look at shot quality, I know a site that both you and I like the work that Simon's doing. Shot quality says the open 3 rate allowed, they're 176th in the country, which is just average. It's not terrible. But in 3-point catch and shoot 3-point defense, 353rd out of 358. That would suggest some bad luck. It seems like that's happened to him quite a bit throughout the course of the season. I think Weber State is a well-coached team. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Weber State wins this tournament. Having said that, it wouldn't surprise me if they lose the first game. That's what's tricky about one like that. And that's also why I think a money line rollover makes a lot of sense there, because plus 410, I don't even think we'll get close to what you would with a money line rollover. So enough about Weber State. Do you think Montana is a team that could make a deep run? I mean, or do you think they could just pull an upset but wouldn't likely win the whole thing?
I think they could, because they've already beaten Montana State this year. So if they get past Weber State, I think they'll have a lot of confidence. And again, this could be another close to pick 'em type of matchup in the semis between Montana State on a neutral, because I believe they were 3-point underdogs, maybe a little more against Montana State at home. Maybe it was closer to 2. I'm having a hard time remember, but they've won that game by a couple possessions. So I would have to imagine that would be another pick'em game. So yeah, I could see it. I think Montana State is the most talented team in this conference. I don't think anyone's going to argue that with Bello. And I think he won the regular season player of the year alongside their head coach, who won coach of the year too. So they're going to have a lot of momentum, but yeah, it's going to be really hard to beat a Montana State team in that semifinal spot.
Okay, so let's look at the bottom of the bracket here a little bit. The number 2 seed, Southern Utah, the number 3 seed, Northern Colorado. If those two teams were to match up there in that game, what are your thoughts on a Southern Utah versus Northern Colorado matchup?
The total is going to be high. that's my first thought. Yeah, but we have to remember that these games are at a neutral site in Idaho. It's in Boise, right?
Yeah, it is. And
it's in Boise.
I looked up this venue. The overs and unders are about even here. So this is not one of those, Madison Square Garden or something like that. But it is still a neutral site.
It's funny. Back in 2011, Northern Colorado won it for the first time, and I was a freshman in college, and we were the number 1 seed in the Big Sky. So back then they had it at the number 1 seed's location. So they must have changed that, I think, around like 2014 or 2015. But I think if we get that Southern Utah, Northern Colorado matchup, it's got to be, again, pretty close to pick 'em. And that's what's really interesting about the Big Sky is it could be pretty chalk. And then in these semifinal games, regardless of who wins, unless somehow, some way, like 11 or 10 or 7 or 6 gets through, it's going to be pretty much a pick 'em in the semis.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Close to, at least, yeah.
I think Northern Colorado is a team that both you and I have kind of looked at as having some value in general throughout the course of the season. You know the team really well, so do you feel like they're playing well here at the end of the season to kind of to peak at the right time?
Yeah, if you were to make a comparison with Weber and Northern Colorado, it's almost like they flip-flopped, right? Northern Colorado started the season a little iffy, and there were times, again, back in that end of January, early February timeframe, I think I told a few people, I'm like, yeah, Northern Colorado, this isn't their year. It's just not coming together. But as of late, they've started to kind of figure it out. And I think the defense is a big part of that too, because they were giving up, on average, I think over 80 points. But as of late, they've started to dial down a little bit. But they still have those outings where they give up like 94 points to Idaho. Like, that's just unacceptable. And then they'll come back and they'll only give up 66 to Montana on the road, right? So if they can put together a good defensive performance, which is kind of a 50-50 proposition at this point, they're more likely than not going to have a good offensive game. So it's just a matter of, can they string along those performances in one game? And they're coming off a loss to Montana State where Raekwon Battle hit basically a half-court shot to defeat UNC. So I think they still have confidence. To me, Kyle, I know I went to school there, but I got to say, I think this is probably the best value play for me. And it's around plus 600, correct, at Barstool?
Yeah, plus 650. Pretty good number there.
So I would have to kind of lean towards that. I mean, I hate to be a homer, but other than that, it's me looking at Weber, who's been terrible as of late, or Montana State, who we mentioned it's plus 180. I don't know how much value is there.
Yeah. So what do you think a Northern Colorado, Eastern Washington line looks like?
That's really interesting. I think it would be around 3 at the most.
Yeah, probably 2, maybe something.
Yeah, like just because Eastern Washington, they've had, they're kind of a sneaky team here. I guess one angle you could look at is Eastern Washington future, but then they would have to get past Northern Colorado. I mean, it's possible. It's hard to say. I feel like in this side of the bracket, there could be some shakeup.
Yeah, I like Northern Colorado here, and I think one of the reasons too, I mean, 650 I think is probably a pretty good price for the future. We talked about how with Weber State a money line rollover would be better. I think it'd be close here. There are pros and cons to taking a future versus a money line rollover. It's easier to hedge a money line rollover, but you have to remember to do it every single game, certainly. I think Northern Colorado has the best player in the conference in Dalen Kuntz. I mean, that guy is a really good player. You know that. I don't even think that's, who else would be better? McEwen from Weber State's a good player, certainly, but I think Kuntz is the best player here. He's good at attacking the basket. Northern Colorado can shoot. They're a little bit better defensively of late, like you said. They're not really a team that shoots themselves in the foot too often with bad mistakes. I think Northern Colorado has a shot here. So I'm gonna side with you on this one and think that plus 650, a good price. And I think maybe anything better than about plus 550 is a fair price here on Northern Colorado. Certainly shop around. We talk about that at Sports Wagering U quite a bit. Don't take plus 350 or 400 when you could get 5 or 6. Big difference there. It'll make a big difference in the long run. But do you have any other thoughts as far as betting single games in this one? I was just kind of, I was looking, Ben, as far as the totals in this, there's going to be some really, really high totals. I mean, like a Northern Colorado, Eastern Washington game or Southern Utah, Northern Colorado, probably 157 and a half. But at a neutral site, what do you do with something like that? What are your thoughts on single game betting here throughout this tournament?
Yeah, so I think the best strategy is to watch the early games and to see how the rims fare. And to some, this may sound silly, but we saw this in Arch Madness, and we've seen it for years prior where the rims are, we call them stiff or hard.
Ridiculous.
And and it's literally, if you were watching some of those games, I mean, AJ Green was missing these layups that I feel like would go in at other arenas, which sounds crazy, but it's just the way the rims kind of impact the ball and the ball just kind of bounces out. It's like if you've been to the park, right, and they have those really hard rims, maybe it's not that hard, but it gives you an idea that it does make a difference. So it will be interesting to see how they look in those first games, because then the later games and then the Thursday games, you could potentially get some value on some of the unders, but that also could not be the case. And it could just be normal and there could be value on the over. So it's kind of a wait and see. But Kyle, one thing that I want to point out, this is an angle that a lot of sharper guys will look at, is that Sac State Idaho under with the early start time. I know a lot of sharp guys will be on that. I don't want to say they're blindly playing that, but the idea is the game is so early where these kids, their whole sleep schedule and their body clocks are just a little off, where it may take them 10 extra minutes of game time to get acclimated to the time of play. It's one of those angles that you have to probably look at a few other things, but I know for a fact that I spoke with some other guys who are going to be all on those first half unders.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is I wouldn't take the over in that game. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that number is coming down. I think it'll keep coming down even more. So if you like the under in that one, you probably want to bet it. In general, I would guess that these numbers will get bet down. Ben, you know this. There's been so many games going way under the total in these conference tournaments. So I
Yeah.
think the market will adjust. And as the odds makers put out these numbers, if you want to bet the under, you hurry up and do it. If you want to bet the over, you wait and bet it later. I think that will probably be the case in this one. Having said that, if they bet some of these games down enough, not that Sacramento State Idaho game, but if they bet some of these other games down enough, I could take some overs here because some of these teams are just so weak defensively and some teams so efficient on offense. I could see some pretty high scoring games still here. Like you said, as long as the rims look decent. And I don't think it'll look like Arch Madness because that's just so extreme.
They got to figure that out. That's almost just like using different balls at that point. Like it affected the game way too much. For sure. Oh, what was the other thing I was going to say? I lost my train of thought. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I'll talk for a minute and maybe
Okay,
I'll come back to
yeah.
you. So we'll close here soon, but we've got a bracket here that is pretty wide open. I mean, there's a ton of teams. There are a ton of teams here. Would it stun us if any of these, top 6 teams win it? Not really. I mean, there's plenty of conferences where you could say, okay, Villanova or, 1 or 2 other teams in the Big East, only ones that really have a chance. In the Big Sky, just about everybody has a chance here. So I think this is pretty wide open. Should be a lot of fun. These games aren't on TV until the final game. That's crazy. ESPN Plus for these. So I'll probably be tuning into some of these. I do like watching the Big Sky. I imagine you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remembered what I was going to say. It was on the note of the fouling and the foul calls in these conference semifinals and conference championship games. And I've been watching several. And I think, for example, the Horizon League, like the refs were swallowing their whistles. It had to be pretty egregious for them to blow the whistles. Now, obviously, different refs here. But Kyle, I'm curious, have you been tracking anything with like the number of fouls per game in conference tournament play versus regular season? I know it's a lot of work to do something like that, but would it be fair to say that that's one of the reasons why maybe we're seeing some lower totals is just less foul calls?
Yeah, it seems like they swallow their whistle more. I don't have data on that. After the season, I could look at something like that. Right now, just too much going on for me to be able to look at that. I will say I track the tempo changes, and tempo is down. But part of the reason tempo is down is if there's less fouls called, right? Because there's a lot more possessions in a game if you're constantly going to the free throw line. So it is happening. I think that's pretty normal. And then sometimes we see a bit of in March Madness, it can kind of go back and forth where at the beginning of the tournament, there can be quite a few fouls called. And then later, as they get deeper in the tournament, the refs don't want to decide the games. But it'll be interesting to see how this tournament goes because I agree with you. I've seen quite a bit of that too. I would prefer that versus seeing, 75 free throws in the game. Gosh, you and I both know those.
I've lost a few games this year, man. Like, oh my God. I'm like, there's literally a foul every other possession. It was hard to watch at times.
It's so bad. It's not even really basketball. So I guess the main theme here is we both think there's some value on Northern Colorado. Just about anybody could win this thing. Watch for the totals numbers because I think those will move around quite a bit. Weber State, definitely possible to win this thing as well. Probably a money line rollover would be a better look there in that one. Ben, take a minute to let us know about what's going on at Capwise and anything else you have going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will have our March Madness guide sent out again on Sunday this year, actually a few days earlier than we had last year. And I think we sent you one last year and you helped promote it. But this year we're adding a lot of more insights. We partnered with a market research company called Sportfolio King. So they're going to have a lot of really cool metrics and graphs to use for in-game betting too, which I'm super excited about. But we'll be doing a lot of coverage on the tournament, of course, as you will be. And I'm looking forward to it. I mean, March Madness last year was great to have it back. We didn't have it 2 years ago, but I think this year is even going to be better because it seems like now, the guidelines are kind of gone away at this point, so we can have full stadiums, full fans, and I'm really looking forward to it. So you can find me on Twitter. We're doing live streams on Twitch, and yeah, reach out if you have any questions or have suggestions. I'm always open.
Nice. Yeah, I recommend it, guys. Ben and Nick do a good job there at Capwise. So check out their work. Ben, can I put you on the spot here real quick? I just thought of this when you were saying that. So you have any futures that you like for teams to win the NCAA tournament?
You know what's funny? Someone just asked me that like 3 hours ago, and I don't. But I'll say this though: I always like to look at the sweet spots around like the minus. Well, I should say 20-1 up to like 40-1. It seems like more times than not, you're going to get the best value in that range. I think teams that fit are like Arkansas, Alabama, teams that have a pretty high ceiling, but also are inconsistent. And I'm actually okay with that in March Madness because you can get on that run, right? And as long as they can make the Final Four, anything can happen at that point. So those are some of the teams just off the top of my head that I'll look to target, even though I think Gonzaga is going to win it all this year. They're, I think, plus 350. So I don't think there's much value there. But yeah, those are just a few teams that come to mind, but I'll have some more official ones once I look at it.
There you go. So
what about
check
you?
out, I was going to say, so check out Ben's Twitter, and then he'll probably be posting something about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing Twitch. I think Illinois is the team that comes to mind for me because they have a really high upside. They could lose really early, but they could also run the table here. I've seen 45-1 on Illinois, pretty good price. I think a team like Illinois is exactly what you just said. They have the upside. You're okay with inconsistency as long as the ceiling's high enough. You want the high ceiling. You don't want the consistent team that's pretty decent. You want the team that has the potential to be excellent. So, and Arkansas, I think, is a pretty good look as well. So I haven't bet anything yet.
Yeah, and the reason why is because you're going to face a team that is hot, right? You're going to face a team that maybe shouldn't be there, like a UCLA that is on fire. And we look at last year, if Gonzaga wasn't hot, I mean, they had to hit a game-winning 3 to beat UCLA. So I think that's a really good point to make, Kyle, right there.
Yeah, well, let's close it with that and check out Sports Wagering University. Everything going on over there, sportswageringu.com. You can follow on TikTok, on Twitter. You see the link below as far as the initial classes we have up. We have up a college basketball class. Ben and I will be doing some work as far as some future classes there. Also, Nick will be part of that as well from Capwise. So we're excited about everything going forward at Sports Wagering U. Appreciate everybody tuning in here today, and I hope you have a great March Madness.
See you guys.